Robotics, once a scrappy field of tech startups, is starting to come of age. I'm Beth Motter here with ZDNet's Greg Nichols. Greg, you've been covering robotics for quite some time now. We have some big news coming out of the industry. What's going on?
Yeah, so robotics, which was once a fairly fractured field of scrappy tech startups, is really starting to come of age. And the latest proof of that is a set of interoperability standards that will allow for autonomous mobile robots. These are industrial robots that, move materials from one side of a warehouse, for example, to another, or, mobile pick and place machines. From leading vendors. These are competing vendors to integrate and work together in settings like factories, warehouses, and e-commerce fulfillment centers. So yeah, pretty big news across the industry.
Yeah, that is some big news. So I guess my next question is, how did all of these competitors decide to work together?
Yeah, good question. So Mass Robotics is an independent nonprofit, and they are the ones who recently released what's called the Mass Robotics Interoperability Standard to allow for units from competing automation firms to seamlessly interact. And the initial participating vendors is a long list of them, but those that ZDNet readers might recognize: Locus Robotics, Six River Systems, Vecna, AutoGuide mobile robots, third wave automation. So there's a whole list of them. And they're all working together to bring these standards online. And the thinking here is that a rising tide in the automation sector is going to lift all ships. It's going to help everybody. And there always has been some strain of collaborative, collegiality in the industry, which is fairly tight knit in terms of the engineers. A lot of these engineers come from a small handful of powerhouse robotics grad programs and storied development labs. So a lot of these people tend to know one another or know the same people, at least in common. And also, robotics, unlike personal computing, was really founded on a premise of open source operating systems. The Robot Operating System, ROS or ROS, which lives under the stewardship of Open Robotics, which was involved in these new interoperability standards, is really the foundation for a lot of existing commercialized products in the automation sector. So some of this strain already exists. But what's interesting is we're talking about customer-facing brands from different parts of the sector that are now working together. These are competitors in some cases, and they're working together. And a big part of the willingness to collaborate is the surging demand for automation attributed to this huge boom in e-commerce and the corresponding expectation, of course, among customers of lightning fast fulfillment. So those are some of the factors behind this new interoperability standard and the ability now for these robots to communicate with one another in service.
Interesting seeing how that technology has kind of come full circle at this point. Greg, how have we seen the surge in e-commerce drive automation?
Yeah, so to put it simply, there's just a lot of demand right now. The global AMR and automated guided vehicle market is expected to balloon to billions of dollars, something like $14 billion by 2026. There are now hundreds of vendors in this space, and AMR adoption is really growing at a brisk pace. The CAGR is expected to be something like 45% between last year and 2026, which is just like astronomical, right? Huge growth. And in that environment, it really does make sense for competing vendors to build in interoperability. With logistics companies expanding and already benefiting from the flexibility afforded by the current spate of AMRs, which really require minimal downtime for operators to bring them online. In other words, operations don't have to shut down while they bring these things online for very long. A paradigm in which buyers are locked into a specific automation manufacturer really limits growth potential across the sector. Where on the other hand, an interoperable paradigm, it really bolsters the case for automation among potential customers and potentially gives competing automation manufacturers multiple bites of the apple here. A warehouse that already uses pick and place machines from brand A, for example, can now integrate AMRs from brand B into that same operation. And the integration, it also benefits from being safer. Now these robots are working together, they're sharing information, which previously wasn't possible. So, overall, the sector seems to just get a benefit if these robots can really communicate and talk to one another.
Yeah, Greg, it seems fascinating and evolving having these robots be able to talk to one another throughout the industry. So, final question, how did this collaboration come about?
Yeah, so this all came together fairly quickly and actually came together during the pandemic, which corresponds, of course, to a major surge in e-commerce demands. The Mass Robotics AMR Interoperability Working Group, it's a mouthful, was formed in 2020, so just last year. And the group's newly issued standard, it allows for the robots, for different types of robots, to share status information and operational conventions or rules of the road, so they can work together more cohesively on a warehouse or factory floor. The standard enables the creation of operational dashboards for managers and really gives operators insights into a fleet of robots instead of into this kind of siloed by brand view of how robots are functioning. And in part, that effort really was driven by customers. And those are customers we're talking about, major operators of shipping and distribution centers, for example, those who really fuel the fulfillment part of e-commerce. By necessity, they've cobbled together automation systems from multiple vendors to provide for a range of applications. These are fast-growing operations, so they've really needed interoperability to continue to expand, without the hiccups that bringing on competing systems can sometimes bring. So the first use case for these new interoperability standards will be trialed at a FedEx facility where AMRs from Waypoint Robotics and Vecna Robotics, along with some others, are going to be operating in the same production area. So, across the industry, I know there's a lot of interest and people are keen to see how this is going to play out as these competing robots or competing robot manufacturers, rather, are kind of working in the same space side by side. It's a big change for the industry.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for your time. Thanks so much for breaking this down. As always, for all things robotics and all things tech, be sure to stick with ZDNet. Thanks for watching.